Two humorous nurses would like to acknowledge the true custodians of the land in which we record our podcast, the Yorta Yorta people.
We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders listening today. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. BizCare have proudly partnered with the National Breast Cancer Foundation to start a conversation. When's the last time you checked your breasts? Early detection of breast cancer can start with a simple self-assessment. So check your breasts today and be breast aware. Two humorous nurses with Kelly and Jessica.
Welcome back to part 2 of Devastating Diagnosis with Brad and Holley Jones. We're going to jump right in and we will catch back up with Brad as he tells us about his second devastating diagnosis.
But you weren't only diagnosed with vEDS. Like, once you'd sort of got used to that diagnosis, you were lumped with the CML diagnosis. What was the timeline there?
Diagnosed, obviously, with the vEDS in 2019. It was 2020. Was it
during a COVID lockdown?
Yeah, early January 2020 COVID times. I had neck pain, and
no, you were diagnosed. Sorry, you were diagnosed in August 2020.
Oh, sorry.
Let's start again. So in August 2020.
In August 2020, COVID times, I was experiencing a bit of constant neck pain. Did it go on for a few days? So I can't.
Yeah, you kind of were like, I have a headache and I've got neck pain, and it kind of went on for a few days. And I was like, I don't think you've slept funny. You've got vEDS. Let's just go get you checked.
Yeah, so we followed the procedure, which after the vEDS diagnosis, they highly recommended anything, the slightest thing, just ring the paramedics and they'll rush you to hospital, obviously due to the nature of vEDS. So anyway, we got rushed to the Shepparton Hospital. And, on the way there, you're sort of thinking in your head, 99% it's going to be another vEDS-related issue. We get to the hospital, they run all the tests, which is very routine at this stage, which is all like the CT scans, the contrast, blood work. That all come back fine this time. And they said, no, we don't believe that you've actually had any vascular or, issues inside. And so I'm sort of sitting there going, well, why have I had this constant headache and neck pain? And it was at that time, I think, where did you go, Hole? You ducked out to the cafe, or was it to the car?
They had come and said to us, oh, we've done your blood tests. Your bloods are just taking a bit longer than usual. I'm an asthmatic and they wouldn't let me in for very long because it was COVID, and they had said, oh, you can come in and see him for a bit and then you need to go back outside because we have limits or whatever. And I was like, look, I'll go down to the pharmacy and get my Ventolin because I was having asthma. And I remember walking back as I said, look, can I go back through to my husband? I'll go home soon and get the kids. And I was walking back and I saw a lady looking real nice and professional sitting and talking with you. And you looked like a ghost. And there was a nurse standing there and then this lady in a professional looking outfit. And I was like, who is this lady? I'm thinking, you got a visitor? Like, what? And I remember walking up and it was a social worker. And the social worker was sitting there giving him the news that he had leukemia on his own. And he had said, my wife's coming, and they were telling him, we think you've got leukemia. You need to go and have a bone marrow biopsy now. So he was sitting there. I've walked up and I'm like, what's going on? And Brad's like, oh, I've got some bad news. And I was like, oh no, he's had a friggin' major dissection or something. And then I'm like, what's wrong? And then he's like, oh, I'll let the social worker tell you. I was like, yeah. And then she's like, oh, well, look, Bradley's bloods were flagged to say that we believe he has chronic myeloid leukemia. And to say, after all the years of the hospital, the calls to the ambulances, dealing with all the really traumatic sort of stuff, I had never cried. And I was just being strong and I was holding it together. And I remember as soon as I had heard leukemia, having someone pass away close to me from the recent times, as soon as I heard the word leukemia and then thinking cancer, I absolutely lost it. I remember just bawling and howling like, what? Because it was that instant thought of, oh my God, he's going to die. Like, I was like, because, you get triggered. And that was his diagnosis.
And for me, like, as Holly's coming back from this little asthma attack she had, it was actually, I think it was a social worker and a hematologist. Yeah, blood work person, I think they are.
It was.
She was actually there, and she was the one actually giving the news. I think the social worker was just sort of hanging around. When I was expecting, all right, I've had another vEDS related thing, but when she turned around and goes, Brad, we've looked at your blood work, your white blood cells are quite high. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, what's that mean? And she goes, we believe you have some form of leukemia. And it's one of those moments when once I heard leukemia, it's like, it was like I was in my own little world. Everything just went quiet around me, and all I could hear was leukemia. And I'm sort of sitting there in shock, like, am I hearing this correctly? Like leukemia, like what's the chances I've got this other rare condition?
How unlucky can one person be?
And then to come back and say you've got a blood and bone marrow cancer on top of that.
Which is also a rare cancer to get.
Yeah.
And it's
at that
uncommon.
age. Yeah.
And then
So they're not related at all?
No relation.
So okay.
The CML, the chronic myeloid leukemia, is how I've been explained to is my body's just decided to produce white blood cells on its own, which is then turned into this CML, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is called the Philadelphia chromosome, which is how you work out if you've got CML.
Well, there's a lot of like the leukemias and the myeloid leukemias are like super complicated. Like it's not rare, but it's like you're young and you can manage it in the nature of its name being chronic, but it's still shit. Like it's still cancer. It's still leukemia. Yeah. Like it's still and isn't it funny how you have vEDS, which could literally at any moment like end you, and you were like, oh my God, I have leukemia, and that is what sent you into a tail. Both of you were like Holly, you just said like he could die, and I was like, like, isn't it funny how it's that diagnosis that was what tipped you both over the edge?
It's like anyone, like you hear the word
cancer.
Anything to do with cancer, you straight away think, oh my God, like that's crazy.
I think it's because we talk about cancer. Everyone knows about cancer. It's you mentioned leukemia. Someone has heard about that before.
And it's with Holly's family member just recently going through a cancer
I was
diagnosis and situation.
And passing away. So
it was fresh in our minds,
And then after that, we sat back and then we kept saying to people, oh, you know what? vEDS is actually worse. And we kind of just laughed at it.
Because if you compare the pair like that, compare the pair. For me, and what research and what we know, vEDS is actually, I'd actually say vEDS is the more serious because it's a lot less known about. There's not really any confirmed medications which can help or cure. There's no cure that we are aware of. Pretty much
it's not like you can test your body and be like you can test your blood work every month and be like your CML is stable. Your CML is stable. The treatment is working. It's stable. It's not like you can scan you and say, oh, that artery looks like it's about to dissect. Let's jump in there. Like you can't actually do anything preventative for vEDS.
You're pretty much with vEDS, you're prisoner to your own body. Your body will decide what it wants to do when it wants to do, and you just have to take it on the chin. Where CML is a little bit more known about it. Obviously, there's the oral chemotherapy, which I take daily to help maintain my levels. And you know, as the at the cancer center, they told me was 20 years ago, this CML diagnosis, it was like a death sentence pretty much because it was so not much known about. There was no
chemotherapy.
There was no chemo, which was actively controlling it. But 20 years later, they say, you know, if you can control it, take your medications and keep it maintained, there's a high chance that you will die with the CML. It won't actually kill you, but you actually die with it.
Yeah.
You won't die from it. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can keep it controlled and keep it at bay, because with it being a genetic switch, I've been told I'll never get rid of the leukemia. But if I can control it with the chemo and keep it at bay, I can live with it and live a relatively normal life. But then vEDS might throw that out of whack. So, so really, if you compare the pair, I'd say the vEDS is the more one that I'm a bit more worried about. Where if I can keep the CML controlled, then
What symptoms do you have with the CML?
So the main symptoms is obviously the side effects. I get a lot of side effects from the
chemo.
The chemo.
Yeah.
So on my bad days, I get nauseous. I get really fatigued. I can be, running to the toilet all day with, diarrhea and itchy skin, especially with the weather heating up. I can get really itchy and irritated skin. What did some others hold?
I mean, yeah, you've probably mentioned a lot of them.
Yeah.
Fatigue's a big one.
Yeah.
Like one day you can have energy and the next day you'd be so zapped, or you can do something big and then you'd be zapped for a week.
That's the crazy thing. Like one day you can have a day where you think, shit, I feel pretty normal. And then the next day you can be bedridden, running to the toilet with diarrhea and just feeling so nauseous and itchy skin. It's one of those things you just got to take day to day because, it just changes. And then on top of that, vEDS has its own issues, like the fatigue's a common one with vEDS and body aches and whatnot. So
with the two conditions, which are actually are chronic, so you have to live with them for the rest of your life.
Yep.
What impact has that had on your life at the moment, in the sense that you were working, you were playing football, you were a young dad, you were fit and active and healthy, and now you have two chronic conditions, and you're still a dad and you're still a husband. So what impacts has that had? I remember Holley used to drive you everywhere. And those little things that we probably don't even think about, like we get the cancer, the chemo stuff, like the fatigue and nausea and all that. I think everyone understands that. But what about the impact of just the disease on your life?
So when I was officially diagnosed with the vEDS, my specialist and all that through the Royal Melbourne and St. Vincent's at the time, they put me on limitations and restrictions of what I can and can't do. So at the time, and it still is to this day, I couldn't lift anything over 5 kilograms. I couldn't climb or work at heights due to the risk of something happening and falling. I couldn't operate heavy machinery. I couldn't drive for quite a long period of time.
You didn't drive for probably 3 years.
Yep. So Holley was driving me to and from work and to appointments. So I was given all these restrictions. I was able to go back to work, but obviously, and at the time I was actually at Bunnings in Shepparton working. So I was given all these restrictions, which then meant my work had to then work around with me to get me a job position which would suit where I wasn't putting myself at risk of any harm. So that took a toll on me at work, because you go from, doing just a normal job, which you could pretty much do anything, to getting a very limited job position, which at the time meant I felt like a bit like, how do I explain this? At the time, I felt like
you felt like a bit of a burden, I guess.
A bit of a burden on the rest of the team at work. And, I felt like I was always, if I needed to lift something heavy, I always had to get someone to give me a hand. Or if I needed something from the top shelf for a customer, I couldn't operate that machinery. So I always had to go bug someone to go and operate the machine. Or I felt like a real burden with that.
But it was also because you kept having so many dissection in your body, like literally every 6 weeks, you had used up all your annual leave, all your sick leave, you were constantly off work. Your job was then under you were gonna end up losing your job because you were having so much time off. Because as soon as you have a dissection, they would say, right, you need to be on rest for 6 weeks.
Yeah, minimum of 6 weeks they recommended that I wasn't able to work.
So no work then.
Because obviously, if the dissection, depending on the seriousness, if it didn't require surgery, they wanted me to have that minimum 6 weeks to allow my body to heal, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that dissection would heal by itself, which luckily so far everyone has done.
Yeah.
I mean, that was 6 weeks off work. I used up a lot of my annual leave, all my holiday time. I was very lucky at the time that at Bunnings, my bosses and work were very understanding. I mean, if I had bosses and work that, weren't very understanding, they could have just said, sorry, Brad, this isn't working out. You're missing too much work. You're off. But I was so lucky that I had very good bosses who were understanding. And so I was then put on all these limitations, and I was able, I had all these restrictions. Holley was still able to drive me to and from work. I was still able to work when I could. But when I was diagnosed with the CML, that pretty much put the nail, in the coffin working. And at the time, I was actually home because COVID had really hit my work bad. So due to my risk of my health and that, I was actually at home. I wasn't working at the time because COVID was so new. We didn't want to risk me getting COVID and then bringing it home to my family due to all my health situation.
Yeah.
So I was at home, and when the CML diagnosis come, that was pretty much it. It was like, work wasn't even on my radar. They told me you have to start chemo straight away. So what else do you remember from that period, Hol?
So you basically just you stopped working. You resigned, and I said, look, there's nothing we can do. We've got a newborn baby. We've got Hunter. We can't, you've got chemo now. You need to start chemotherapy. There's no way you're going to be able to go back to work now. And so you resigned.
Yeah, and at the start of the treatment, I was so crook, it was my body hadn't adjusted to it, and the side effects were kicking my ass really bad, and there was no way I was capable of working, and as from a employer's point of view, you say I was very unreliable because some days I could come in, some days I'd ring up and say,
sorry,
I can't come in. So we made the decision I'd finish work and focus on treatment. And we actually decided to then apply for the disability support pension, and which I was very lucky. I was actually, within a week, I was, due to the severity of all my conditions, I was actually accepted within a week.
Some poor person at Centrelink probably opened up your file and went, oh, whoa, Jesus Christ. Shit.
Who is
Let's
this guy?
Just give him everything.
They're like, yep, check.
Thank God.
You hear a lot of horror stories with people getting disability support pension that they need to hire their legal team to push their efforts. Where with me, I was literally accepted within a week, no problems, whatever. I think with so much going on, they just looked at it and went, this guy's got it bad, we'll just give it. And
did your specialist have to fill forms out for you? Because I know I've had to have forms filled out for patients for Centrelink, and the oncologists always write, they really do make it. And I always say to the patient, when you read it, we might not think it will sound worse than you are, because they know how shit the Centrelink can be, and so they'll often put extra information in there.
Paperwork was unbelievable.
You needed a letter from your GP, a letter from your hematologist, a letter from your cardiologist, and they all have to fill it out and agree and say they think you are unfit to work.
And obviously it has to be a lifelong condition. It's going to impact your life, which these two conditions definitely will. And you have to have a lot of things fall into place to get this disability. You don't realize it until you actually have to go for it, how hard it is to get the disability support. And that's why I say I'm very grateful for how it worked out, because I got it within a week, accepted, no problems whatsoever. And then you hear of some other poor person who's got really bad health and they get denied and denied and denied.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful to this day that I was accepted, because financially it took a lot of pressure off me and Holley. I'm able to get my pension coming, which then can support Holley and the boys and the family. And I know it's a constant thing. And I don't feel then, if I'm having a bad day and I'm bedridden, I don't feel guilty then on how am I going to,
Provide.
raise money to help Holley.
Yeah.
I know it's constantly coming in.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of weight off your shoulders sort of thing.
Did you know that in Australia, 1 in 7 women are diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime? 57 Australians a day are diagnosed. While mammograms are free if you're over 40, you actually aren't notified about them until you're 50. So check your breasts at home every month or with a medical professional, because early detection saves lives. BizCare have proudly partnered with the National Breast Cancer Foundation to support their goal of 0 deaths from breast cancer. So join them in the inspiring movement to raise awareness and ignite discussions around breast health and getting your breasts checked. So head to biz-care.com and join their fight. Go pink with BizCare. The breast things in life are worth getting checked.
We have questions here for you, Holley, about, but I think you've answered some of them already in there. But obviously, Brad's story is like, it's like the way you talk about it is incredible. I haven't spoken to either of you really, other than text messages, about your conditions over the time, and to hear you talk about it, and I know that, Brad, you've worked with medical doctors and stuff, and been like a patient story for them when they've had training and things like that. So I'm sure you've told your story multiple times. And I thank
Did you ever see that vascular surgeon again, the one that was questioning you?
Oh, yeah.
No, so
what a shame you couldn't
rub it in his face. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is funny. It was like 2 weeks after that I got the official diagnosis. I received a phone call from the actual, like one of the junior doctors or something that was learning under him. And she was like, "Oh, hi, Brad. We found out the news of your diagnosis and we are in absolute shock and couldn't believe it. We just wanted to apologize and say, we're thinking of you and we're so sorry to hear, because it's such a terrible condition." So I think they must have received the news and gone, "Oh my God, like we told you."
Well, that's nice.
Wasn't going to happen. And then they've gone, "We better ring up and see." And
and it wasn't until like the next lot of medical doctors until you had a dissection in your carotid artery. The internal branch had tore a couple years ago now, and that then led to what was it, like 12 people who were learning to be a doctor needed to do their final exam before they could become a doctor. And Brad had this phone call to say, "Hey, you've got a really interesting condition. Can we use for the exam?"
as a case study.
And he was used as the exam. And so he had constant phone calls, and he'd sit there and answer all these questions. And then these junior doctors then would have to go and do their exam. And so, you've helped so many people in so many ways, and raising awareness and people learning.
That was pretty crazy too, because I had so many phone calls of just these random young doctors calling me and with going through all their questions they needed to ask. And at the end of the day, I thought, look, if it's going to help improve them as doctors, then why not? They're going to have a bit of awareness about my conditions, which then if someone else ends up in their care, maybe it will help them out. And they'll sit there and go, "Hey, this reminds me of that fella that had these conditions. Maybe we should look at this." And it was funny because I did all this case studies for them, and then I ended up getting a phone call eventually off the head honcho tester, and they said, "Look, we're that invested in your story, and you've helped out so many of these doctors. We actually want to use you as the final exam piece." So I ended up being included as part of the final exam piece for them. And after it was all done, I actually received a card in the mail from that hospital and everyone, and a gift card saying, "Thank you so much. You've helped out so many." And, that was wonderful. I'd never did it for anything in return.
No, of course.
For them to do that, it was lovely. And
you felt like you had like a a little bit of a purpose.
Yeah, it gave me a bit of
He kept saying, like, I've
Yeah.
got purpose. I've lost my job.
a bit of positive can come out of this, and hopefully, like I said, it can help these young doctors, and they can then put their learning skills onto the patients and hopefully help out the patients in the future. So that I felt proud about that, because at least I felt like I was contributing to something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Um,
amazing. So
yeah.
and you'll make a difference in their lives. I will forever think of something that you said that might, they might see something similar and just think, oh, what about this condition or that condition?
Yeah, and at the same time, it's also, I always wanted to be a good role model for my boys, and obviously with them having vEDS from inheriting myself, I always wanted to show my boys that, it's okay to have this condition and health conditions and still be happy, still be positive, live a normal life to the best of your capabilities. I never want my boys to look at it and go, it's a burden. I want it to just, it's a speed hump sort of thing in your life, but then at the same time, they're going to know it's serious and what to look out for.
But I want to talk to you guys about your kids, because obviously both your boys have got the vEDS gene. Are they both have the actual condition that can have the same thing as you, Brad, or do they have the mosaic? Can you tell?
Yeah, so as far as we know, they've got the exact same as me.
Yeah.
How it will affect their life, we're unsure.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, I've had a lot of issues, but they may be lucky enough where they don't get affected till later on in life, or they may be very lucky and it never affects them.
Yeah.
It's sort of one of those things we're being told we just got to take it day by day, month by month, year by year, and just, ride the roller coaster of it, really.
And so far, our 7-year-old, he's experienced his first dissection recently, and that was behind his eye, and that presented as vomiting, blurry vision, which could be look at, a nurse or a
literally anything.
It could look like so many different things.
Yeah.
You might have a migraine, or you might be got a viral infection, and it was his eye had dissected.
Yeah, a little blood vessel in behind his eye.
And so and he's 7.
And it was only because he was obviously flagged with the condition that they took it further and looked into it more and investigated, which if he
previously we would have just went, if we didn't know he had vEDS, we'd be like, oh no, he's just unwell.
And previously doctors and specialists might have just brushed that off as
must be sick.
But because of that confirmation, they took it a bit more serious, which is great.
Do you need to do any regular checks on them each year or anything like that as they grow?
Yeah. So the boys have a cardiologist, and they go and see the cardiologist once a year, and they have their ECGs and an ultrasound on both of their hearts and all the arteries in that area. They also have had their first MRA, I think it's called, where they go under anesthetic and they do like the MRI of the body, and they put the contrast through and they light up and they have a look and check everything out. This will continue for the rest of their life.
And currently, because they're children, they're through the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And as they progress into the adult stage, they'll probably go obviously to like the Royal Melbourne, like me.
Yeah. And they have said to us too that, later on, maybe when they get to like 16, they probably will need to start aspirin and medications and stuff. They do, like Hunter, one of his aortic branches or valves, were enlarged and there was a little bit of issues there, so they're keeping an eye on that for Hunter, I guess, just because the last time they measured that didn't look too right.
But in a positive note, this is the beauty of them knowing this condition, because they can get this yearly monitoring and scans. So if there is the slightest thing happening which we're unaware of, it'll be picked up and hopefully it can be managed and monitored before it gets anything too serious.
Yeah.
It must be really scary for you guys as parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, look.
I don't want to say like helicopter parents, but I can imagine that, like, if you're at the playground or, they're just doing normal kid things, that always in the back of your mind, there's like, oh, shit, like something.
Yeah. We always say that
when
Hunter's he started school and we looked at the playground we were like, oh my God, please don't fall off that, because
Yeah.
high impact causes dissection or whatever. And they bruise so easy. Like, they've got translucent skin, they bruise easy. Like, we were like, oh my God, please don't fall off the playground, or please no kid crash into them and let them fly. Like, it just, there was so many things. And they'd say to us, they can't do contact sport now. They're not really meant to fly because elevated blood pressure is not good. There were so many things that they were like, you need to guide them through their life and get them to not do. But it's like, how do you stop your child from playing with their friends' footy? How do you stop them from running around playing chasey and going, what if they fall over?
Like, you want your kids to be safe, but then at the same time you still want your kids to be kids and to enjoy life. So it's a real,
so
like,
hard.
It's hard. And then on top of that, as parents too, like you guys would understand, if you get crook or something, as a parent, you're like, oh, I'll be right. But when it's your children, it's a totally different situation. It's really scary. When we found out the boys had it, I was actually more worried about the boys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm like, I'm a full grown man. These are only little kids. And then you also got that guilt, like, are the boys gonna, like, not be happy with me when they're older because I've given them this condition? Are they gonna be angry at me and say, Dad, because of you, I got this bloody health condition? But then it's the total fear of your children getting it. I couldn't care less about myself. Like, I know that's bad to say, but when it's your children, it's a totally different level of worry.
I think, and I don't know if I recently just went to a conference, like literally yesterday, and it was all
fresh in her mind.
Yeah, it's like created a lot of content for me, I think. But we talked about this like patient rounding, and Jess will probably roll her eyes because it's all big at the hospital at the moment. But there's an acronym that they use to do the rounding called AIDIT, which stands for like acknowledge, introduce, duration. Oh God, what does E stand for?
Come on, you can do it.
Explain, and then thank you, right? And it's a way to approach. And we had a couple of people that were speaking that had been patients or had been by the bedside of people who had been in critical situations, and things had happened to them and were happening around them, and nobody acknowledged them. And one lady was like, her father had been in a workplace accident and his body had been crushed, and she was like, everything was happening and people were coming and going and no one told us anything. And I just wonder, and we're gonna do an episode on this AIDIT, because I actually think it's something that is so fast that nursing, anyone in healthcare, anyone within a hospital setting, anyone in life really could do. But like Holley, when Hunter had his first bleed, and I know you went to hospital with him, and you are the best advocate for your family. Like you can
You're all over it.
You have it nailed. Like those boys
should have been a nurse.
Have you. You should have been a nurse, but you're going to be a teacher instead, aren't you? You're going to be like a beautiful teacher. But I think that I wonder if the people, when you took him to the hospital and you were worried because it could be anything related to vEDS, and if it was around his head or his tummy, how serious that could be. Did people approach you in a way that made you feel comfortable and seen and heard and supported as a parent? Because it was COVID too, so I know, and I mean, obviously you have Isaac at home and Brad at home, and you went with Hunter, and like, I just wonder from this patient experience, like you're talking to nurses, like both Jess and I, but obviously everybody that listens, like, is there something that people did or didn't do that made that experience first time him going to hospital with this condition?
I feel like no one really asked if I was okay.
Yeah.
And no one kind of really went into depth about his past history. So I saw a lot of nurses that day because it was so busy. There was a lot of car crashes, and there was a lot of things going on. And I remember they're in and out, and I was seeing so many different nurses. They weren't the same ones. I was repeating my story, and I had a lot of them say, oh, what's that about his vEDS? I'd explain, and they're like, oh, yeah, okay, no worries. Oh, he's probably just got a viral infection or something. Oh, he's probably had a migraine. And I just felt like it was kind of being brushed off a little bit and not really, not listening to me, but more just really paying attention to what I was saying. I wasn't just being a paranoid mum. Like, I had been in situations before with Bradley. Like, I am a person who's attention to detail. I'll remember everything. I'll give you a rundown. I'll give you all the details you need to know. But they kind of just got the information, then left and kept, like, they were so busy. So I saw so many faces, but no one actually was like, you're right. Do you need anything?
Yeah.
Like, it was just give me whatever information is. All right, bye. There was one nurse who I actually knew, and because she was a parent at my son's school, and he's actually friends with her son. And she was like, oh my God, I saw your name, my son's name pop up. I was like, oh God, why is he in here? And she shot out. She comes straight to see me, and she was like, oh, like Holly, I'm so sorry. I mean, on a personal level, obviously, because she knew me, but I just think maybe I feel like sometimes we can get so caught up in your occupation and the busyness, and maybe we just don't stop to say, do you need anything? Are you okay? Like, it was 7:00 at night, like, starting to get late. We were then there till like 2 a.m. in the morning. I feel like maybe it was just, I think it's just how we speak to each other and maybe really acknowledge what's happening. I know sometimes, they do see a lot of children, and people can be helicopter parents and, oh my God, something's wrong with my child. Like, and it can just be a viral infection, but in some cases it's not. And I just feel like if a child has a medical condition and I'm giving you the information that I know, like, to take it on as it might be. This could happen. Yeah.
And it's so true. Like, I mean, we all do it as nurses. Like, I mean, I think of the number of times that I probably didn't, even just to say to people, like, I'll be back in 10 minutes, or I'll be back in half an hour.
Never give it time.
No,
but you should give it time, and then you should go back.
But you can never get back. But you never get back. Or that we don't care enough.
And this is where good rounding and the purpose behind rounding will actually change that. She says after being at a conference for 2 days where everything was rounding. But yeah, I'm going to
be the champion of the hospital. Are you going to
hell yeah,
get it into...
All of us are. We're all like, who are we going to round with? When are we going to round? Like,
so Brad, you're really involved in a charity for vEDS. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'm involved with Annabelle's Challenge Vascular EDS charity in the UK. There are lovely, lovely people who run that charity who are personally affected by vEDS themselves with one of their own childs. They actually started the charity. Do you want to explain this?
So initially, before Bradley actually became the Australian ambassador for Annabelle's Challenge, we had Googled again vEDS and were linked to this charity, and it had said, fill out the form and we'll link you into the groups and it will provide support. And we were like, this is great. Finally, someone else that has vEDS and we can connect to people. And they reached out and said, oh, look, you're in Australia. Like, we only know of a couple of, a group of people that have got vEDS over there. And they really started to connect with us, and we built that relationship. And then they kind of said to Bradley, like, would you join us in being an ambassador for Australia for people with vEDS? And so you joined Annabelle's Challenge, and Annabelle's Challenge, like Bradley said, is in the UK, and they raise money to fund research for vEDS. And they have been currently they're in a lot of research projects at the moment for vEDS,
They are.
to find out, different ways maybe to support people with vEDS or, for the future. And they're incredible. Like, we are so grateful for them because, it kind of, again, it gave you another purpose. You joined the Annabelle's Challenge. They have a special day called Reds for Vets, which is once a year in May, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And you wear red and you share it on social media with the hashtag Reds for Vets. And the point is to get it across the globe to raise awareness for it. And that's something that we're both really passionate about getting out there. We all wear our red t-shirts and take our photos,
and it's and I will say it's a real honor to be asked by Jared and co at Annabelle's Challenge to be the Australian ambassador. I never expected that. I actually just joined as a patient and ended up building a relationship with them, and then they asked if I would do that, and it was an honor. Like, it's another way I feel like I'm giving back to the vEDS community and raising that awareness, and hopefully it's by doing this and helping other people in Australia, it's going to help them out in the long run.
I just quickly live Googled to see how many people in Australia have vEDS, because I was like interested.
Yeah.
And it says, obviously the first thing that comes up is Annabelle's Challenge. And it says there's only 280 people in Australia, an estimated 280 people who have been diagnosed with that. Like, that's a very small number of people.
And unfortunately, I've been told the sad thing about vEDS is most of the time people find out they got vEDS after they've passed. So there's probably other people out there but just have no idea or haven't had any issues. But in saying that too, it's also a rare condition, so there may not be a lot of people, but that's the sad reality. A lot of people tend to find out after they've passed due to a health issue, and that's how they're linked into the vEDS.
Yeah, that's really sad. And I suppose I didn't think about that because, if you just have a big catastrophic bleed, then you're not going to know if that's your first bleed.
Yeah, that's right.
A big thing is family. If you've got a family history, it will really help with the journey to a diagnosis.
And we've met a lot of families who have lost family members, lost children, lost their parents a lot of the time. And they say, I didn't know I had vEDS until I lost my dad or my mum or my brother or my sister or my child. Some people have lost their children.
Which unfortunately is obviously the case in our family. With me personally losing my mum and then finding out through my diagnosis that she had vEDS, and that's what caused her issues. And, but Annabelle's Challenge, they do a great job. They're incredible. They're lovely people. We've met them. They've come over to Melbourne for a support group meeting, and that was lovely to meet them face to face.
Yeah.
And they can be found on social media. So on Instagram, all you have to do is look up Annabelle's Challenge and Reds for Veds. That'll pop straight up. They're also on Facebook.
Google.
And you can just link to them straight away. Easy to find, aren't they?
Yeah.
Do you are there any support groups in Australia? Do you do anything with Australian people?
Yeah, so there is a few Facebook groups actually where you can join, and it's is it Vascular Ehlers-Danlos support group? There's a few on there. There's also the Annabelle's Challenge. They have one group in particular, and then we also have a little chat for people in Australia, and it's just the Australians who have vEDS. And we swap stories and we talk about it. And there's also a group for just partners or family, because in my situation, I don't have vEDS, but my whole family does.
And that's the power of social media is you can find a lot of those groups through Facebook, and you don't even have to be in Australia. There's worldwide groups.
There's groups
for vEDS from people all over the world that have vEDS, and you can connect with them, you can relate to them, share your stories. And in doing that, you're not feeling isolated or alone, because it's very, very unlikely you will walk down the street and run into someone else with vEDS.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of this syndrome.
Yeah.
But then it's crazy. On the other hand, you can jump on Facebook on one of these groups and connect with someone over in America who has it, or England, or it's unbelievable.
And I think the other part is because you connect so much and you meet so many people, there's also the sad reality of it. A lot of people do pass away.
Yeah.
And so you do make those connections, and then you wake up one morning, and it's social media is so hard, because then you read it and you're like, oh.
And that's a big, like, obviously day-to-day life, you can sometimes forget your health conditions because you're so busy and invested in, especially if you've got kids. And then the next, like Holley was saying, you'll wake up and you'll see someone in the vEDS community. It may not be in Australia, it might be on the other side of the world that's passed. Like, there was a couple of really young kids that passed away with it. And like, I think the one was like a 12-year-old, and this was quite a while ago. And I remember sitting there that morning going, bloody hell, like.
And his mum had only written on the Facebook page 24 hours beforehand saying, please think of my son. He's been taken, to hospital and ED. He's got tummy pain. Please pray for him. And then the next day we woke up and he was on social media and he'd passed away from a dissection.
Yeah.
And it's just then you go back to reality of, you're reminded.
And it's a big wake up call when that happens too, because you sit there and go, it reminds you of the seriousness and what could happen. And then straight away as a parent, you straight away think about your kids. Like, what if that was my kid? Like 12 years old, that poor child has not even lived a life. Like
that, I think mentally that's the hardest part is we really had to go through the process of going, okay, you've got it. Our children have got it. We don't know what's going to happen. We've got to live every day and just enjoy life and not take it for granted.
Tomorrow's, like, for the average person, tomorrow's not promised, but obviously if you've got health issues, it's, a bit more limited. So
I think that's why we're so positive. We advocate. We think it's really important to talk about it, to get it out there instead of just keeping it to ourselves. We're happy to talk about it. We're happy to advocate for vEDS. Because we think it's so important to get the information to as many people as we can.
At the end of the day, I'm happy to be a guinea pig for the hospitals. I'm happy to, if someone asked me go on Channel 7 News or whatever, I'd do it. If it's going to help someone out there raise awareness, get the word out, I'd do it. Because at the end of the day, I feel like I've helped people. I'm doing something that hopefully, the more information out there will hopefully maybe one day lead to a cure. And
that's all we can hope for. We really hope one day there's just like a breakthrough of.
And even if it's not a cure, hopefully it's a medication that can really,
exactly
put a hold on the devastating effect of vEDS. And, I may not see it in my lifetime, but if my kids do, then that is fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much for both being here today.
No worries.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're both incredible humans, and you've never let either diagnosis really bring you down. Like, I mean, I love watching you on social media. You moved, you did a big sea change as soon as you were well enough, and we're like, screw our little town, we're fucking off to the ocean. And you're always off doing something, and I know social media is a highlight reel, but we appreciate that in between those moments, there are moments where you're literally in bed smothered in cats and your kids. So so
can I just add it's pretty much a plug for my own social media account. So I actually have a Instagram account, and it's all about my journey with CML and vEDS. It's just day-to-day life and, just a bit of information. So if anyone would like to follow that, the page you can look up is vEDS_zebra.
That's all I have to do. We'll link you to his public profile.
My ugly mug will pop up. And that's
you just stole Jess's line, Brad. You stole Jess's line.
Yeah, you stole my line. God, Brad.
Error mind reading.
Yeah.
I'll have to improv.
Thank you so much for having us on. It's been a
Yeah.
pleasure and
We hope it can, some nurses can gain some more information
Yeah,
about this
definitely.
and learn from that. And
yeah.
We will
Amazing.
link everything in the. I'll steal Jess's line and then she can do my line instead.
Now you're stealing.
I'll link everything in the show notes for like Annabelle's challenge and for your Instagram page, and then just where people can go to get a bit more information if they're interested in the VEDS and what they can do. I mean, lots of nurses will listen, so hopefully they might get triggered by something if people come in and.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe the nurses that listen have dealt with me before too. So
yeah, there's a lot of Melbourne nurses. So
I think I remember that heavily tattooed guy.
The ball.
Yeah, that's right.
You can follow us on Instagram at 2 Humorous Nurses Podcast. Be sure to rate us 5 stars on the podcast platform you are listening to us on. Also, don't forget you can follow us on Facebook in our private group. Just search 2 Humorous Nurses Podcast.
And send us an email if you want to hello@twohumorousnurses.com. That's humorous like the bone, HUMERUS. Bye.
Bye.